Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Leader Series presented by the Dish Women's Network. I'm Paris Bradley, and this is Michelle Lichtenfeld. And we are so excited for you all to be here today. I can't tell you how happy we are that you're all taking time out of your day, and I want to thank you so much for being here. The Dish Women's Network was really formulated on an idea that happened a little over a year ago. I started going to a lot of women in consumer electronic industry shows and events. Sounds like some people are out here. Shows and events throughout the country. Come on in, yeah. All right, one more. Got started a little early. Here. Thank you. But this idea was really generated a little over a year ago when I started going to a lot of women industry events throughout the country. At these events, both men and women alike came together and were able to network with one another, foster relationships, be able to learn from industry leaders, and more so, learn more about the consumer electronic industry as a whole. So when I came back to Dish, I realized that we had a huge opportunity here, that we ourselves could emulate a lot of the strategies and ideas from these events and create our own network here within Dish, thus the Dish Women's Network. So the Dish Women's Network is really important to us, but one of the things that I was reading a couple weeks ago when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about was on Business Insider. And according to an article on Business Insider, it referenced what the women leadership were like within Fortune 500 companies and above. And of the C-suite, so CEOs, CMOs, CIOs, women only hold 14% of those positions, 14%. So I thought to myself, how can we learn from these 14%? How can we learn from their mistakes? How can we learn from their successes? How can we ourselves become the 14%? And more importantly, how can we raise the 14%? So Dish Women's Network really is going to be that platform that will allow you to become the 14%. Our hope here is that you'll be able to foster relationships, you'll be able to have self-development, you'll be able to have education, and you'll be able to network across the company as a whole. Our vision is really to empower all of you to become leaders here within Dish. And speaking of leaders, a lot of people within this room were really instrumental and led the way in order for this event to be successful, as well as this organization. So I want to say thank you so much for what you've done, and more so, I want to thank my amazing sidekick, Michelle, whom without this organization would not be possible.
Thanks, Paris. I would like to reiterate Paris's thanks to all of you for taking time out of your day to come and spend an hour with us. I'd like to thank Thea Ellis, who's going to be our first speaker, and she's going to share with you some insights from her experience and her professional, journey at Dish. Before that, I'd like to give you a brief overlook of the next two events that we have coming up in July. You'll receive more information about these in your email and on the hop. But we will have a continued speaker series, which will be in the first week of July. And then we will have our corporate-wide network launch party at the end of July. Again, keep an eye on the hop for that. After the launch party, we're going to have a distro sign-up where you can learn more about how to get involved, how to go to networking events, how to get a mentor, how to be a mentor, etc. So keep an eye on the hop, and you can sign up for that distro. Additionally, if this is something you're passionate about or interested in and you'd like to volunteer on a committee or run an event for us, please see Paris and I afterwards. I'd like to give a special thanks to Vivek Khemka, who's been our executive sponsor and has provided a lot of leadership, guidance, and support as we put this network together. I'm now going to pass it off to him to say a few brief words.
Thanks. So kind of interesting that not a woman standing up here to no, but it was about 2 months ago, I think both Paris and Michelle came to me and said they had this idea and they wanted help, and I think it's great. I like to think of diversity in our leadership team or diversity in the company as being very important in our decision-making process. People from different backgrounds, people from different experiences, and definitely I think women, women think slightly differently than men do, and it's really important in the decision-making process to have a nice balanced mix of people around the table. So there's a lot of interest across the country right now to promote women leadership across, if you look at what's happening in the Bay Area, Google, Apple, all of them are thinking about the same issues that the two of them here are thinking, and I'm sure more of you across this room are thinking. Many of you know my wife also works here, so definitely, I see some of the challenges of women in a company, and I appreciate the challenges. It's not easy, and I think if she could share her learnings with a lot of you, or you share your learnings across each other, I think we'll make this place a better place for all of you. So I'm happy to support this. Any help you need going forward, sponsoring events, leading events, I'm happy to support the initiative overall. So thank you.
We're also very lucky to have the endorsement of our HR team, and Mike's going to say a few brief words from that team. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Michelle. Hey, everybody. So I just want to congratulate Paris and Michelle on, I think it's a great DISH story. I mean, it's like a grassroots effort, It's a great example of a great idea that through just sweat and hard work and, kind of, starting to network with other people, they created this amazing turnout that you have today. So I think there's a lot of appetite for this group. From our HR perspective, I mean, DISH is, we want to be about and we want to do better at making sure that every employee, regardless of their, the gender, race, age, orientation, has the ability to grow their career to the extent they want to grow their career. And I think that these kind of true grassroots groups, which I would call it, this is not a corporate, it wasn't like the corporate idea that we need to have a women's group. Right. This is a grassroots effort because you guys want to work together, network together, and we want to support that. So, who knows what we're going to achieve together, but I'm really, really excited and pleased again for the organizers and for you guys, and excited to hear from Thea. So with that, we'll go to the main event, Thea Ellis.
I have a mic. I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I am super, super excited about being the first speaker contributor to kick off this awesome event. I would like to take an opportunity to thank these two, Michelle and Paris, for really exhibiting dish paw and really seeing that there was a need for this kind of organization and actually doing all the work that you've done over the last year to actually get this off the ground. I think it's also really important to thank Vivek, and I think it's very telling. And I appreciate what you say in terms of you being a senior executive up here supporting this event and not being a woman. And I think that, in every single group, whether you are, a woman or a person of color or a member of a GLBT community, everyone's looking for allies. And it's really great to know that we have an executive and ally like you in supporting this event. And yes, absolutely. I'm going to highlight a little bit today in terms of the diversity of my experiences, my professional experiences, and I've actually worked at some companies that have affinity groups like this. And I will say it's really been a great tool to have people who have joined an organization to find a sense of community, for the people who are part of an organization to build a community. And it's also really an incredible tool to be able to keep retention. So I also want to thank Mike and the rest of the HR team to endorse this event. And endorse this group because it really does speak to a good fabric of what the DISH community can be going forward, and that we can all benefit from it. So a lot of you in the room I actually know, and some of you know me, but there are a lot of you in the room that I don't know, and so you guys must be like, who is this girl talking to us today? So I'm going to spend some time to actually talk about who I am. So these are my people. I am the baby of my family. I'm the youngest of three, and my parents are actually from Jamaica, West Indies, so I am first generation American. They moved from Jamaica, West Indies to Jamaica, Queens, because they love all things Jamaican. They also sent me to Jamaica High School, so I was not kidding. But I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, was born and raised there and lived there for the first 18 years of my life. And had a very great experience, I think, of growing up in a very working class community, but also realizing that there was another element of what made me different by virtue of having parents who are not from this country. After I graduated from Jamaica High School, I went to Hanover, New Hampshire, where I went to a very different kind of environment. Hanover is very unlike Jamaica, Queens. Any of you who have ever been there, it is very rural. But a great environment. And I studied sociology and public policy at Dartmouth. And like some students, when you graduate from college, I was like, this is awesome. I had a great time of learning how to think and having all these intellectual conversations with a lot of my peers. And upon graduation, I was like, what am I going to do with this degree? And a good friend of mine, in an effort of almost leading the blind, said, well, if you don't know what you want to do, you should go to law school. And the only thing I knew about lawyers was what I learned from Dick Wolf, like from shows like Law and Order, right? Which seemed really, really cool, and it seemed like, you know, you can get things done in 60 minutes. But before an effort of actually going down that path, I had a little bit of wisdom imparted on me, and someone said, how about you work at a law firm first? So I went back to New York and worked at a really big law firm in Midtown Manhattan called Davis Polk & Wardwell. And after working there for a few years, I realized that I did not want to be a lawyer. That idea of kind of being the champion and convincing a jury of my peers or the defendant's peers about, you know, why my position was right, I realized that that's not really what a lot of lawyers that I was really interested in that they did. And so around that same time, a young woman named Paris Hilton got really, really popular for seemingly doing nothing. Right? She didn't have a movie out, she didn't have a film, she didn't have a record, you know, album or anything like that, right? She just was being Paris Hilton. And she was really, really popular. And I was flabbergasted. I was like, how is this woman being able to market and make money by virtue of just waking up and breathing and people following her life, right? Come on in, come on in. And quite honestly, my sister, who lived in LA, said, oh, she has a publicist. And I was like, what is this thing called publicity? So I actually went to Barnes & Noble's, which, oh, no, come on in, it's okay. I went to Barnes & Noble's, and so for some of the young folks in the room, that's like, what's that? That's a bookstore, right? It's like the pre-Amazon thing. So I went to a bookstore, and I got a book called Public Relations for Dummies, right? And I read that, and I was flabbergasted. And it was kind of the idea of if I'm not interested in actually convincing a jury of my peers about my position, I wanted to be able to influence the jury of public opinion, right? And so I moved from New York to Los Angeles, and I actually did celebrity PR at a small boutique agency called 15 Minutes PR. And I was the fourth person hired, and I, over the 5 years of doing PR, actually developed our talent division. So I worked with a lot of A-list people like Lizzie Kaplan, who now is on Showtime's Masters of Sex. She was my first client. I also worked with Anna Kendrick, who did her Oscar campaign for a movie called Up in the Air. And I had a bunch of B and C's list celebrities on shows like Dancing with the Stars. And after doing that for 5 years, I really did like the work. I just didn't feel like I was getting a lot of the experience that I hoped to get, right? So there was a lot of strategy and a lot of convincing, and I loved that aspect of it. And I learned how to be very social, which was great. And quite honestly, I didn't have the elements of, you know, being mindful of revenue and cost and all these things that were traditional business concepts that I just didn't have any exposure to. And so after doing that, I decided to move from sunny Los Angeles to cold, windy Chicago, Illinois, to, yeah, there it is. And I went back to school. And so I went to Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management to get my MBA. And I went and I was like, I'm gonna do all the things, I'm gonna get on board with all the business elements, and I got really into the wave of marketing. And I was like, I'm gonna be a marketer, I'm gonna market, you know, Tide like nobody else. And between my first and second year, I actually did not go to P&G, but I went to S.C. Johnson, and I was marketing toilet products, which is just as sexy as celebrities, or not. And so I really loved being at a company that was probably one of the biggest companies I had worked in, and definitely in some time. And it's a privately owned company that's family owned. And I love the culture, I love the strategy and the advantages of being able to work for a private company. But I just did not like the products that I was working on. And so I went back to school for my second year and really was grappling with the idea of loving to have aspects and having an opportunity to work on the traditional business side of things, right? I had to be mindful of cost and margins and all those things at S.C. Johnson, but I really liked the sexy element of entertainment and Dish Network, right? A great marriage of entertainment and media with all the business opportunities that I was looking for. And so I've now been here in Denver, Colorado for 3 years. I am a general manager in our programming department. One of the things that I do is lead our negotiations with our programming partners. So the Scripps deal last year, I led those negotiations. Upcoming, we have a Viacom negotiation that I'll be running. And I also work with some of our smaller partners like The Blaze or Reels Channel. Don't you worry about it. And all the experiences that I've had in working for big law firm or small agency, or a big private company or a big public company, there's been a lot of lessons that I learned in terms of, what actually allows us, people in general, but women in particular, to really be successful. The first lesson I learned is from Paris Hilton herself. Do not be afraid to self-promote, right? Now, you want to have something to promote, but don't be afraid to self-promote, right? I think a lot of times as women, we can be very humble, and we don't want to toot our own horn. And you do the work, and you do great work, and you feel like after you do the great work, someone is going to acknowledge your presence and acknowledge the fact that you did an awesome job. And that may happen. If it happens, it's awesome. But you could wait around for someone to toot your own horn forever. So you better get to tooting. So that's lesson number one, right? The other one is don't be afraid to try new things, right? I went from leaving Hanover, New Hampshire, like, what am I going to do, to go into a law firm, to going into PR, to going into a consumer packaged goods product, a company, and now working in a big media company, right? I have done a lot of things, and all the skills and lessons that I've learned from all those varied experiences, I actually use in the job in which I do today, right? And we actually are working at a really cool company that allows you to be able to easily transition from one department to the other, which I would say don't take for granted the fact that that's something that is not typically as easy to do in some other companies, right? And so don't be afraid to try new things. And the third one, I realized, is really what I want to talk about today. And it's something that I realized that I learned in the very first organization that I ever joined. And that's this one, right? My parents, if you just bear with me for a little bit, my parents, I call them the founders of, yeah, that's me. I call them the founders of the Ellis family, right? They're the co-CEOs. My mom is maybe more the boss, but they're the co-CEOs, right? And they've provided all the essential benefits that I needed. I have two siblings, as I mentioned. They are very much, made me realize that there was a hierarchy in our system. My siblings had been with the organization longer than I had been. So they had built up some social capital that I hadn't quite had. And I realized very early, as young as 7, that I could benefit from that, right? So my brother was a traditional teenage boy and made a lot of mistakes. So I was like, I'm gonna use him as a mentor, right? We talked about the value of mentors and being able to run ideas and brainstorm things by people. And I would use him, and if he typically said, yeah, you should do that, I was always like, maybe I shouldn't do that, right? But my sister, who is, I call my parents' favorite child, had built up a lot of great social capital with them. She had built up a lot of trust and been proven to be very responsible. So I realized very early that if there was something that I wanted to do, if she was in alignment with what it is that I wanted to do, she was willing to go to bat for me. She would vouch for me to my parents that I could actually get someone on board on my team to help me with my own initiative and progress through our family. And I think there's a lot of people that talk about mentors, and that's great. But what's really critical is a sponsor. My sister was my sponsor. And when you start thinking about your career and exactly what you need, mentors are great to be able to brainstorm ideas off, but you need someone who has some authority, who has some skin in the game for you to be able to help get you on that next big project or help you get that promotion, right? And if you think about it, and I look at my career and look at my family life, it was definitely a critical skill for me to learn and kind of navigate that organization with those advocates on my behalf. But teachers, growing up in a very working class urban environment, there were teachers who actually vouched for me that literally changed the trajectory of my life in a way that I would not have had without those people really going to bat for me, right? And the reality is, everyone in this room has had a sponsor, whether or not you fully acknowledge it, right? So we all interviewed here at Dish, and we were up against other candidates, right? And there was someone who may be your boss today, or someone in the hiring department that went and vouched for you and said, this is the best candidate, right? And that person had the authority to be able to weigh in on your career and give you access. And that's critical, right? And we need to think about that and think about how being deliberate with that is important for your career. And so And I just wanted to highlight something in terms of really emphasizing the point and the difference between being a mentor versus being a sponsor. A woman named Sylvia Ann Hewlett, who has a great book called Executive Presence, I just learned yesterday. She also has a really good book called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor that I wish I read before this talk. But it is not, I did not get it through Barnes & Nobles. It is coming to me through Amazon. And quite honestly, she highlights the fact that sponsors, their chief role is to be able to develop your career, right? And it's not this idea of they're doing it because they want to be nice or they're trying to be altruistic. It helps them too, right? Someone who's going to go to bat for you, they're going to bat for you because you've proven yourself. You've highlighted yourself as being someone that can help them. And so when they go back to bat for you, they really are going to bat for themselves as well, right? And they're furthering your career and furthering theirs, or their vision for a company, their vision for their department, their vision for a project. You can be a critical element in being able to do that. And the critical thing here, again, and I want to underscore this point, a mentor is someone who in an industry is very valuable to be able to introduce you to new people and share and brainstorm. A sponsor is someone who can actually do something for you, right? And that's the critical difference. Now, we were talking about this and saying, well, why does this matter? Why is this at all an important element when it comes to the women's network here, right? And the reason why it matters is very much in line with what Michelle and Paris has started the day with. And that's this idea of saying that there are women who are occupying 14% of the C-suite. Fortune magazine last year actually did a study over the course of the last 15 or 16 years. And in 1998, they did a count of the number of female CEOs that were part of Fortune 1000 companies. And back then, there were 2. And last year, there were about 25. So the slope of the line is great, right? But there's still, call it 970 plus companies that are largely run by men. Now, does that mean that there aren't other senior executives on these important companies that are women? No, right? Here at Dish, we have Kathy Schneider, who's an SVP, and there are big companies as well, like Sheryl Sandberg, who's COO of Facebook, right? There's obviously women that are in the C-suite, but the point of this organization and the point, I think, that a lot of different companies, as Vivek highlighted earlier today, are really trying to expand the number of women and really increase that diversity, right? And this is critically important in terms of when you're thinking about a mentor or sponsor, right? The idea is if we're talking about someone who has authority, and when we look at the one example that you can point to in terms of CEOs of who is that authority, that means that they're probably inherently not women, right? So you really are going to have to find someone who is a man likely to sponsor you. And also be mindful of this point as you accelerate in your career and become someone who can sponsor someone else, right? So Melody Hobson, who I adore, I think she's an awesome business person who's president of Ariel Investments, and she's also chairman of the board of DreamWorks Animation. She highlights the fact that you can look at that element and think, oh my gosh, that's a really obstacle, it's a really high bar to climb to try to convince someone who may not be aware of all the issues surrounding women in senior leadership. But she highlights that in her career, she's found some great men who have actually been her true sponsors, one of which is the founder of her company, of Ariel Investments. And she highlights the value of having advocates or sponsors who are inherently different from you, because the reality is no one's going to feel like there's some perceived bias, right? If someone's going to bat for you who seemingly seems very different from you, that there really is some additional weight there in terms of you being awesome, right? You being the person for the job, you being the person for the project, and all those things are critically important. And so with that, I'd like to open up some dialogue and actually have this be a conversation, because I think the spirit of this organization is for us to all utilize one another, right? And be able to have a dialogue that is honest and true about what we can actually do and what tangible things we can take out of this room and bring into the next event to actively change this statistic about the 14%, right? One thing I will say, in an effort to do that and so that everyone leaves as inspired as when they came in, some ground rules: this is not a gripe session. We really want to have this be an element of people sharing stories in a way that progresses the conversation, and that is one that's additive, right? That's one element that I want to be mindful of. And in the event that this discussion isn't as resounding as I hoped and envisioned in my mind, I will help us along with some talking points. The forever publicist has some concepts in mind, right? And so with that said, I'd like to start the conversation by saying how many people actively feel like they deliberately try to find sponsors or have throughout their careers? All right, they're like, okay, raise them high, raise them high. Dana, you can raise it higher than that. Okay, so most of us haven't, right? And the reality is, and I'd love to hear from some of you who have raised your hand. Dana, I will not pick on you. But for those of you who have raised your hand, what have been some of the challenges that you feel like you've actually had when it comes to finding a sponsor? I'm looking at you because I believe you raised your hand. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Hi, Kristen Walmsley. Nice to meet you. So, sorry, what was the question again?
What were some of the difficulties? You were one of the few people in the room who had actually secured a sponsor and did so deliberately. So what were some of the things that you did that you actually felt that to help it to actually find a sponsor, right? There's a difficult nature there.
Yeah, I think finding someone who's what you said, different from you. My greatest sponsor in my career has been somebody who isn't like me, right? And I think part of not having him like you, right? It's not biased, right? It's not he thinks I'm good because I'm a woman, right? He thinks I'm good because I've proven him that I can be good. And I think that is really important. So, and somebody who can see your actual results too, right? Because having a sponsor, they need to be able to vouch for, here are the things that this person can accomplish. So finding that balance between somebody who's not a clone of you, but who can also be able to speak truly to what you've accomplished is important, I think.
Awesome, thank you for that. Anybody else who deliberately found a sponsor, what were the difficulties of actually trying to secure one?
Sure. I'm Stevie Schaefer. I think that for me it has been like having a give and take relationship. So having that mutually beneficial state between the two of you. It's like I feel like my greatest sponsors, I was friends with them, and then I realized they could be my sponsor, and then started trying to develop that relationship. And so the friendship had to come first in my experience.
Got it. And so how did you develop that friendship?
The way I normally develop friendship, I've been friendly.
That's fair, okay.
I wish that I could say like I masterminded it, but it kind of happened
Naturally, organically.
in those cards.
Yeah, organically. The organic part of it is great, right? And it's how you'd love it to happen, right? And sometimes it doesn't. And there are some reasons in terms of why it doesn't. And thank you both for contributing and giving some feedback on this today. That doesn't mean that they got the rest of you guys off the hook, so focus. But one of the things that Melody Hobson actually speaks about as it pertains to race is this idea of being colorblind versus being color brave. And I think that the concept actually really ports over well when you think about gender issues, right? Especially those in the corporate workplace. So the concept of the blind versus brave concept or framework is sometimes you go through life and you're like, okay, I don't see gender differences, right? I don't see racial differences. And that is sometimes very politically correct, but it doesn't really allow us to get to the underlying thing that may actually be biases or favors that you have for people that could prohibit or actually make very difficult for people to rise through the ranks. And the difference between being colorblind or being gender blind and saying I don't see the differences or actually being brave enough to say I acknowledge the differences and I realize that some of these unconscious biases that you have or some of these unconscious favors that you give are not malicious, right? It's not because someone's trying to hold us down, right? This idea of, when you're looking at the statistics we've talked about today, the idea that women are not in more senior levels of leadership, and not because men are smarter than us, it's not because they're more ambitious, there are other things, right? And I think finding a sponsor helps to get at some of those other things, but there are a lot of people in the room today. There are some of them that are women and some of them that are men, right? And they're going to be future leaders and they're existing leaders. And it's really important for all of us, whether you are a male or a female, to be mindful of what those unconscious biases are so that when you are in a position of leadership, you can be mindful of them and try to not go to your unconscious natural state. And as you are looking for a sponsor today, be mindful of how people may perceive you, right? And so one of those things is, and listen, biases are not always bad. Google has done a lot of research as it pertains to biases. That the term bias sometimes has a negative connotation to it. But for those of you in the programming department who know me, knows I'm never going to volunteer to go hiking. Although it's something that I want to try to do more, but I'm definitely afraid of the mountain lion that I know is going to kill me when I try to brave the mountain, right? And they have some advantages because they live there and they know that place in and out. But if I go hiking and I see a mountain lion, I'm going to be honest. I am biased, and it is a conscious bias because I don't think that I'm going to fare particularly well, right? And there are certain, and sometimes in business you do it, and sometimes it can help shortcut some ideas to be able to have a bias. You oftentimes in a decision setting want to, protect against that. I think Google had an app that they'd launched, and everyone on the team was right-handed, and then when they actually executed and launched the app, they realized that all the left-handed people were like, thanks. And so it is very mindful to be, it is important to be mindful of your biases, and sometimes there are benefits to them, sometimes they're not. But the reality is, there's all these studies that have talked about, the lunch tables, right, where all the black kids sit together and all the white kids sit together. Now, there's a lot of elements of that are really important that we should highlight. But sometimes you will look at someone who looks like you, and you assume that you are similar, right? Right or wrong. There are elements that if I have twin kids and I find out that someone else has twins, there's a commonality. And those commonalities are ones in which formulate relationships, right? You talk about being friendly, how you met with someone. You guys were friendly. You didn't come, you said hello and you were nice, but there's probably something too that really solidified that friendship, and that's based on commonality, right? And trust and valueship and loyalty are all rooted in those elements, and you have something that's a kicking off point. And so if you walk into a conference room and they're all men and there's only one woman, and that woman is silent because no one's talking to her, it could be that there may be some biases or some favors that are being offered to the men in the room that are not being extended to the woman because she's different. Now, again, not malicious, not anything that's going to make it seem like, oh man, they're not talking to me because I'm a woman, or that they're even conscious of it, right? But you have to be mindful of those elements when it is that you're trying to find someone who can sponsor and change the trajectory of your career, right? Because what happens is men and women who are ambitious, who are smart, who are driven, who are trying to get the job done, and who are all about doing it the best way they can possibly do it, all track along. And then there's some way when it just stops. And we've all heard of that concept of the glass ceiling. And this is all about how do we bust through that glass ceiling. And it's critically important that we do that. And if we're not mindful of why women are not in the place that they are, where they could be, we should be mindful of what these things are. So with that, I'd like to toss the conversation out in terms of, and again, this is about having tangible ways that we can actively try to take a lesson from these sessions and execute them in our lives. And so how do you think that you can possibly break through some of those unconscious biases or favors that you may experience at work or in any other environment, to be perfectly frank?
So I guess I found my sponsor and my director, and I had to kind of pull up my big girl panties and go in there.
Double spanks it, that's okay.
And I had to tell him what I thought I wanted to do. I wanted him to buy in, but I also wanted him to shoot back. Is tell me how it is. Do you think it's a good idea? Is it not a good idea? All in all, a couple of times now, and I've got to support it. He backs me up, and I know going in it might not be easy, but it's worked out in my benefit.
Awesome. And how do you expect to try to use that going forward?
Keep trying. Not all the ideas are going to fly, but all you got to do is put it out there. What's the worst he can say? No.
Yep. Yeah, and no may actually just mean not now. As a former publicist, I look at that. I would pitch clients, and someone would be like, no, I'm not interested. And I'm like, yep, you're not interested now. And I think that's really critical, right? The only answer I'm going to take is yes. And so keeping and having that constant need to go back and make sure, or to invest in that is critical. Anybody else have anything to contribute? Because otherwise I'm going to start calling. There we go.
What I've seen as well is we have a
those native biases or native stereotypes, don't always try to make yourself conform to those. I've seen women in particular hold themselves back because they feel that they have to be a particular stereotype. They have to be quiet, they can't speak out, they have to be called upon, or they can't show any kind of emotion. And don't stick to those stereotypes. Speak your mind, speak up when you need to. Show your emotion when you need to without being disrespectful, obviously. But allow yourself to show passion, and don't expect someone to take the way that you react to things wrong. Expect that they're going to take it like they would any other person, and then if they don't, handle it at that time. Don't hold yourself back.
I think that's a critical one. I mean, and thank you for that. I think it's not unlike what we talked about earlier in terms of self-promoting and women feeling like they shouldn't do that. I think you're right that there are a lot of these views of saying, I don't want to seem too assertive, right? Because you are too assertive, and then now you start dibbling and dallying in the territory that rhymes with witch, right? And nobody wants to be in that pool. You don't want to swim in those waters. But it is critically important to realize that they're all, and you know what, we're going to stop looking at Melody Hobson because we are out there, and I figure we should start looking at who these women are, right? All these women, I'm sure have, and I don't know them, but all these women have a lot of, I'm sure they have very different personalities, very different approaches, that if you were to even look at them and put them in one group, there probably isn't one way to describe them, right? They're probably all not mousy, quiet women. They're not all super polite. There are some of them that probably have no problem saying, you missed that deadline, what's that about, right? And so I think that's critically important to realize that there are certain characteristics that are leadership characteristics, right? And they take different forms and take different shapes, and it's important that we as women be mindful about what those things are, but it's also critically important that men realize what those things are as well. And don't assign, if someone is passionate about their opinion, say, oh my gosh, she just, is it that time of the month? Like, what's going on with this woman? In a way that you wouldn't with a man, right? It's very important that we be mindful of what those unconscious biases are. Did you have something? Oh,
it's along the same lines, but I think a good way to self-promote yourself might be like a weekly check-in with your...
I'm going to ask you to speak up just a little louder.
I think a way in which you kind of promote yourself would be a weekly or bi-weekly check-in status update with a manager. And it's a way to sort of check in on projects that you're working on, and also to your own horn to say, I finished this, I closed the deal. So you have that track record of things that you have accomplished, and he or she as your manager has heard you say that, and then prepare for your interview.
I think, yeah, and I think that's an important one, and I think it's one that you've highlighted too in terms of being able to have constant interactions with your manager, to be very mindful of what it is that you're doing and what your track record is, and it does give you an opportunity to self-promote. One thing I want to also highlight is we're not only just looking for one sponsor, right? It's like you can go to your manager, and I think that's great, and that's probably a good place to start. But I'm always in mind of saying, like, who someone is today doesn't necessarily mean is who they may be in the future, right? So I don't want to undermine the value of mentors, because your mentor today could actually have the authority going forward to be a sponsor of yours, right? But I'm also inclined to say, treat it like your portfolio of your money. Diversify. Really try to make sure that there are people across the organization that know exactly what it is that you're doing. And I actually read Sylvia and Hewlett had some great Harvard Business Review pieces about this very subject in terms of women and how can women actually, burst through that glass ceiling. And one of the things she does, which is I love these kinds of things, is groups. And it's sometimes really, really hard to promote yourself, but if you see other people across the organization, whether you are male or female, and you're like, oh my gosh, that person's a rock star, I want to know what it is that they do, you guys could actually do a cohort and figure out ways to promote each other, right? If there's something that comes up in an organization, if something comes up in programming, we're talking about the Heartland package and how can we, better, market that package, or how can we utilize that in a negotiation. I want to be able to be like, well, Michelle Lichtenfels has really been doing some great targeting emails and marketing campaigns to be able to deliver on that package, right? I am promoting her, and in turn, in her organization, she could perhaps promote me. And so how can you plant seeds in other organizations and be strategic about it in a way that this organization now allows for us to do, because you can now all meet each other and it's much easier to do probably than it was before. But how can you work within the four walls of, I guess, both buildings to be able to network and really be able to plant seeds about what it is that you do in an effort to have people see and know what you do, because they can't sponsor you or can't mentor you if they don't know who you are. Right.
I want to touch base on the sponsorship. I think a lot of us.
You're in the front though, so you gotta. You don't have to stand. You don't have to stand, but your voice has to travel.
I think a lot of us do not realize that we have sponsors or mentors. And for me, throughout my career, there's people that I've gone to in regards to just asking questions, getting direction, and I would take that or that person, and to me, in my mind, that was my mentor. They didn't know that they were my mentor, but that was my mentor. That I would go to them for knowledge, answers, how to handle a situation, and so forth. And I continue to take what I learned from them and apply it to every day. And then when that question came to me, I could tack onto what I learned from them. So throughout my career, like I said, almost everyone that I've looked up to that answered a question the way I needed a question answered was my mentor. And so it's like, for me, many, many people I can give credit for of just getting me to where I am today, of just using what you've learned, take it to the next level, take it to the next step, take it to the next company, next job, next career. And that's what I learned from calling a mentor. A mentor is just ask questions.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another, I think we talked earlier about the friend component of it and kind of locking into friendship. You can actually lock into this idea of, I'm going to utilize you as a resource and then develop a relationship in that capacity, and be able to then really kind of change that along and perhaps maybe even in the future be a resource to them in a way that can add value. Allison.
Hi, I'm going to stand up.
Okay.
My name is Allison Arbor, changing my name to Allison McMurtry, and I had the pleasure of working with Thea in programming. I'm lucky, she rocks. I had an experience a few years ago and I actually started calling people my agents, and I do have multiple. And I had some really good guy friends, and I wanted to make a change, and I was going in and having some tough conversations with people that were really intimidating to me. And I had a couple friends that just rocked at this, and they were men. And I'd have a little pep talk with them before I'd go in. You know this person, he rocks. And I'd be like, what do you think I should ask for? Like, I'll just make it a line. Always like, what, are you crazy? Well, what do you think I should ask for? Oh my God, you gotta ask for way more than that, you know? And I started to realize, can you be my agent? I would like you to go in and negotiate for me. And when I talk about my friends and my coworkers, I can brag about them all day long, but when it comes to me, I'm humble, right? Which does not pay off. So I started a habit where when I need to have a tough conversation with a manager or another executive, I pull aside a friend and I have them give me a pep talk. And in my head, when I'm talking about me, I use all the words that they use to describe me. And I just look at it as like a sports agent negotiation. But I do think we should move to a program where we actually are agents and negotiate for each other, because I think it'd be nice. But it is a hard thing, and I learned it, and I've taken that a lot of places with me. So try and harness your sponsor, your mentor, your agent. Think about the way you talk about some of your friends, some things your friends would say about you, and present that as your front, and it makes things a lot more comfortable. And that's something I've learned along the way.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for that. I will say, as a person who literally for a living had to promote other people and literally say their names more often than I said my own or my family members, it is much easier to talk about how awesome somebody else is than it is to talk about how awesome I am. And so that is a critical element of it for sure. You did bring up a point, though, that I am now going to engage some of the men in terms of what are the things that you do in terms of engaging or finding agents or finding sponsors and actually being able to utilize those skill sets, and maybe would you be willing to share some of those with the rest of us in the room? And I know some of your names, so Yes, Tyler, because you were going to be who I was going to call. Yep, that's right. That's right.
Really, I mean, it's all about like maintenance of relationships to me. I mean, every week I call my mom, I try and call my brother, try and keep in touch with my friends, but you know, in terms of like sponsors and agents, they're further down the list, and you really have to start prioritizing those people in your life. Otherwise, you know, you'll kind of fall off their radar, and you know, when you re-engage them, if you want them to, you know, make a connection or, you know, look at your resume, do a variety of different things. When you're not in contact with those people, it makes it much tougher. So like daily maintenance, once a month, a couple times a month, really helps out.
Tyler didn't speak for all of you, so. Scott?
Yeah, I would agree with Tyler. I think it's very important to maintain those relationships. If, for example, I haven't been downstairs to maybe talk to someone on Tyler's team or, you know, in a while, stop down, say hey, make sure they know kind of what you're working on and find out what they're doing. I see that Tyler actually does that quite a bit. He swings upstairs, he kind of like maintains those relationships with everybody. I think that's the most important thing. And when you do find those people that you kind of look up to, or you kind of want to follow their path, you know, sit down with them once in a while, grab a coffee or something, and really kind of get their feedback from them on you. And you don't have to be straightforward with them, you know, just kind of talk to them and figure it out. But yeah, I would agree. That's the biggest thing, maintaining those relationships.
Okay, sorry, you had something to say. Thank you for sharing that, Scott.
I was wondering, how do you communicate that I need or want that sponsorship without sounding like that I have a hidden agenda? Right? How do you communicate that in a sophisticated manner?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you communicate the need for a sponsor, or that you want that person to be your sponsor, without seeming like you have an agenda, right? And I have mentors that probably don't know that they're my mentors, right? Someone can be your mentor, right, exactly right. Someone can be your mentor and not even know it, right? So there's not this agenda item there. The difference between a sponsor, again, is somebody who has to have authority. And so you want to present your best self to that person, but I think you should also be mindful of, again, how do you self-promote? How do you convey what it is that you want to do, right? So sometimes promoting yourself is not just about all the awesome things you've done to date, it's what do you want to do? I have now gotten really comfortable saying what my dream is, right? And that's to run a network. And I tell everybody that now. And it's something that I probably wouldn't have done before, right? And there are key elements to what that dream looks like for me, and it may change over time, right? But today, that is what I'm geared on. And sharing that with people and having them buy into who you are and what it is you do and what you contribute to an organization, the fact that you see things bigger than what's right in front of you, I think is critically important in terms of developing that. But you may have sponsors today that haven't introduced themselves to you as sponsors, right? But this is about how do you figure out on the back end or on the behind the scenes of saying, you know what, I want Vivek to be my sponsor, right? What do I need to convey to him, or what do I need to have? And that may start with Michelle and Paris, because they're in his organization, right? Of having them know what it is that I do. Right? It may be engaging with him and trying to elevate and highlight what it is that I bring to the table, but also trying to realize that how do I communicate whatever value that I have that helps him, right? Because this is not some altruistic thing. He's not doing it, or he wouldn't be a sponsor of mine for the goodness of his heart. There has to be something that's in it for him, that he's going to vouch for me. He's going to put his name on the line to say, Thea's supposed to get this. She's supposed to be on this project, she's supposed to do this, and go to bat for me. Right? It's not, again, this is not about being polite. It's not like, oh, my mother thinks I'm pretty because I'm half of her, right? There's another element here, right?
I think the other important thing is, you know, it is okay to have an agenda. That is not a bad thing, particularly if it's in line with, you know, let's say it's a DISH initiative. If it's in line with the DISH initiative, that's a good thing. So I think, you know, there are times where, depending on your personality, that you're not really particularly comfortable with that. But if what you want is in line with what the company wants, everybody wins.
Yep. That's a great point. And an example of that is what these ladies have done with this organization, right? And really being able to push that forth, and they got a sponsor of this event because they had an agenda, and it was okay. Shoot.
Kind of going off that same vein, is it ever too soon to kind of jump on that opportunity to kind of further your career?
is it ever too soon? So what do you mean by ever too soon? I'm trying to figure out what that is.
Oh, no, it's fine. So, I've only been here for about 6 months, and I want to progress my career here at Dish. And if I see an opportunity, say, in the next couple months or within a year, is that too soon? Within my department or elsewhere?
I would love to hear other people's opinion on this. I think it's not too soon, right? I don't think this is like, to some extent, I don't feel like these are dating rules, right? Like, I went out with him, I'm not gonna call for 2 or 3 days, and so I'm gonna wait. I don't wanna seem too eager. Like, I wanna seem cool. Like, I don't think it's necessarily that, right? But the idea is, if you want that, there is some track record you have to build, right? So if you came in this week and you're like, you know what I wanna do? I wanna run sling marketing. You may wanna fall back on that, right? You may seem a little bit on the crazy side. You need to build a track record for yourself, right? Because no one, again, is gonna wanna go to bat for you if you haven't proven that you are of value for them, right? But mentors and highlighting what it is you want is not a bad thing, because there may be someone that says, oh, she wants to do this one thing over here, and there may be a project that's coming up that'll set her up for that. And if they don't know what that thing is over here, they can't set you up for what that thing is. But before they want to set you up for that thing is, they have to see what you've done. How do you add value to be able to go to the next place? Which is why now I tell everybody I want to run a network, so that people can start thinking about and be very matter of fact about promoting myself, about what it is that I do and what it is that I bring to the table. But it's also about being very mindful about what my goals are over here to kind of.
Well, and also how do you approach it? Like, say you want to do something else, it is imperative to continue to give 100, 150% to what you're currently doing to show, yeah, I want to do this, but until I'm doing that, I'm committed here, and never losing that focus to say, I can do both.
That is critically important and something I did in programming, right? So I'm going to be very, very candid. Circle of trust, guys, circle of trust. When I first joined programming, there were a lot of big deals that were going on that I didn't have exposure to. And it is what it is. And when I tell you, I picked up everything else. I mean, horse racing TV, there was an issue. I was like, I'm all in for that. Mood music, I was like, oh, what? Okay, I can take that on. You know, anything that nobody wanted to touch, I was like, I'm raising my hand for that, right? And I put a lot of time and effort into those things, and they're still mine, which is great. It's awesome, I love it. But I will say this, I think to that point, I tried to find ways to make myself valuable. In our programming department, I created something that we call Dish University, and now we've changed the name because we realized there's a lot of Dish Universities. But it was a training element. It was how to better train people who came into our department for negotiation or to understand the sides of the business. And I started that on my own, didn't even ask permission. I didn't go to my VP at the time and say, it's okay if I do this. I just booked a training room, asked people throughout the organization to actually put together a presentation and invited everyone in our department just to show up, right? And did that help with negotiations? I would like to think so. But if for nothing else, it was like, I'm going to add value here. And when someone says Thea, I want them to be like, that girl will figure it out. She will take on, she's not waiting to anyone to give her anything. And that's critically important, I think, in establishing where it is that I want to go, but my brand is, what my personal brand is, right?
But what if you were shot down after the presentation that you were not supposed to? Why did you do that? How would you react?
You know, I wouldn't have been subordinate. If my boss said, guess what, that's not what we're doing, that's not how I want to train people, fair, right? And in reality, I probably should have communicated a little bit more, but people were busy, right? And there was a lesson learned in that as well. And so it worked out. But the ultimate guideline, or the bottom line is, even if someone would have said, you shouldn't have done that, I think ultimately it was good intent. It was a lot of good intentions around it. And I think I would have been like, okay, fine, I will say this, can we have a conversation about training? Because I'm new to the group and I feel like I haven't been particularly trained in the best way, or I feel like there could be some improvements. And can I help develop it in the site that you'd like it to be? What is your vision and how can I help actually actualize this, right? So again, don't take no as no. It's like, okay, no may not be not this way, or not now, or whatever. And it's important. I think for me, I'm always about how can I take that no into a yes that's beneficial for both of us, or for all of us. Somebody else had a shoot.
I think men and women alike, I've been with Dish for a long time, is I see a lot of coworkers that get caught with you have a good manager, but he's not the perfect manager to promote you, etc. And they just stop. They just don't try to do their own horn. They don't try to find a way to get your ideas out there. Instead of stopping, I think you just have to find a different platform. Find someone else to listen to.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not all about a title or things like that. I mean, I've rolled out some really good ideas that just make me feel good about, all right, you know what? I did this. And I've had the no's, but I've also had healthy yeses.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I think that's a big part of it for sure. Shoot.
I think it's important that people don't.
I'm going to ask you to shout a little louder. They're recording this, so.
That people don't second guess themselves. Like if you get a new project, that if they ask, can you do this? Your initial response should be yes, no matter if you're sitting there scared or not. Because like now, and also telling them what you're doing outside, that can help your progression in the career. So like I'm getting my master's in CPA. I tell them that all the time so that they know where I plan to go.
Yep. I think that's true. And go ahead, jump on.
To kind of go along with what she said, I went to a leadership event for women philanthropists. It was fantastic. And one of the speakers said, don't say sorry all the time. Don't own your decisions. Own what you decided. Own what you come up with, what you say. And don't say sorry. Be proud of it.
Yeah, I am, and that's a great one. I say sorry all the time. Like, if someone were to pour coffee on me, sometimes I think I'd say sorry to them. So I think that's a good one. And being mindful of how you write. There have been all these studies about how women communicate, and sometimes we use a passive voice. So being mindful of those elements, I think, are critical. Tyler and I went to school together. We were in the same section. We were cash cows at Kellogg. And he'll remember the story. So our first week at school, we were in a negotiation class by a woman named Victoria Medvec, who was like renowned as being like an awesome, awesome negotiator. And she gave a statistic that said that when it comes to men and women, if women see a job description and there are 8 items on that job description list, and they only have 6 of the qualifications, they will question whether or not they should apply. And that men, if they see on the list that they have 8 and they have 1, they will apply. Right? And so, it's important to be mindful of that, right? That those other 2, which means in a woman's mind, you're thinking, oh, that's like a stretch job for me. I'm not quite prepared for that job right now. That stretch is growth, right? I like that as feeling like, okay, it's like buying pants that are too big. It's the opposite. Like women, typically, I have a bunch of, in my closet is a bunch of clothes that I can't fit into yet. Right? But I will, watch me. But just in case, you want to have the clothes you know you can fit into, right? It's the opposite. You want to make, if you wear a 6, you want to buy an 8 so you can fill into that 8, right? You want a job that's bigger than you, right? Leave the spandex for later. Like you want to be mindful of that, and that's what the goal is, right? That's where you learn, that's where you grow, and having a job, you want to make sure you can do the job, right? You don't want to go in a job that you can't do, because that is not professionally enhancing at all. But it's okay to realize that there's an opportunity for you to grow, and if you can build what people call your personal board of directors, your corporate board of directors, they can help you get through that, right? So there's those elements there that, again, that women need to think of and how men and women approach things differently are critically important. Shoot.
To go off the sorry part, I read an article, I haven't read the video or seen the video, but Amy Schumer, famous comedian, she did a I'm so sorry video with people that were representing C-level execs, and they're all women, and like you said, like having someone spill coffee on you or somebody runs into you, we say sorry, and we tend to be more polite, and submissive might not be the right word, but that's not really a part of tooting your own horn, where you apologize for something that you may have done wrong, or you shouldn't apologize if someone disagrees with you. Yeah, they disagree with you, but what you say, they say no, or you say in your head, not now, and going through that and being confident. And since I read the article, I've noticed I say sorry, and I'm kind of eliminating it as I go through every day.
Yeah, it's not easy to do. It's like saying I say all the time. And sometimes I realize I say sorry, it's not because I'm sorry. It's not because I'm sorry. But the reality is it's sometimes like a filler, right? Or it can be that idea of I don't want to seem abrasive, and so I'm not sorry, but I feel like if I say that, that'll make you not feel like I'm abrasive or aggressive. right? Even if sometimes, you know, perhaps disagreeing is okay. So there's that element of it as well. Shoot.
I think one of the things though that I do try to keep in mind, it was featured in Lean In, a Harvard business study where they gave the same report to 2 different classes, and one of them featured, and there was the same study of, this is what the manager did, this is how they approached the topic, this is what they said, and the class was supposed to rank the manager on, you know, whether or not they were a nice person, whether or not they thought they were a good manager. And one class was told the manager was a man. The other class was told that the manager was a woman.
Yep.
The woman came out as being a bad manager, a bitch, and the man was coming out as being a tough person, but probably good to work for. And so I think it's important to have someone else that you work with who you could talk to about, hey, you know, if you're going into a difficult conversation, say, hey, this is how I'm planning on approaching this. And you can kind of find out, okay, am I coming at this too strong? Because I try to work the word sorry out of my vocabulary, but if you make a mistake, you need to own it.
That's true.
So if it's an actual real sorry,
yeah,
you should use the real sorry. So that's where sometimes having a little bit of perspective and ability to perceive how you're perceived is important as well.
I think that's critically important, right? I think if you walk through the world thinking that, you know, how you dress or how you interact with people doesn't have an impact on your professional career, you are really disadvantaging yourself, right? So there's a great study that's in that book, Executive Presence, that talks about, and this is a little off topic, but I think it speaks to the point that you're talking about, that they actually, there was a study in which people were having a music competition and people were playing music, like cello and the likes, and you had people who actually watched their performance and you didn't hear any music. And so they were all judged essentially on how they walked in, how they sat down and engaged with people. And people were able to select the winners without even hearing the music, which says a lot about how you're perceived and how people view you based on how you're dressed and how you look and what have you, right? And those things can be deemed as unconscious biases, right? And so I think it's important to know exactly how you're perceived, but I also think it's really important that people be mindful and open to how do we perceive people. And it kind of goes back to the beginning of the discussion about unconscious biases, right? Sheryl Sandberg did a study or did a series, I think it was in New York Times in the beginning of the year, and she highlighted the fact that there are often times when women, if you're working late at night or what have you, and there's all these projects that need to get done that are not necessarily rooted to the project, but like people have to eat, right? Or someone has to take notes, or all these things that she deemed as being professional housework that men were more inclined, whoever was the boss was more inclined to point to the only woman or the lone woman in the room and say, would you mind giving the rest of us dinner? And everyone feeling like, okay, well, we all have to eat, so yeah, I'll go get the dinner. And then you miss out on dialogue or conversations that are critically important for you to hear in a discussion point, right? Or having the women take the notes. There's also a great study with, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? I'm so embarrassed. Richard Branson. How Richard Branson, there's these stories that say that when he's in a meeting, he takes the notes, and he's the boss. And he does that on purpose of highlighting the fact that, like, we can all do it. But it's not just a woman's work, right? But I think we all need to be mindful about how do we engage. And it starts when you walk into a room, because there may be women who are on your team that may feel as though they're not having that same banter about sports. And so now I have to watch basketball so I can talk about, you know, Steph Curry talking about whatever game was played last night. Like, you know, that it's okay to have that banter and have that conversation, but how can you include women if there's a way in which you don't include women? Because the reality is, and it's fair, right? If you were to walk into a conference room and there were nothing but women, we'd probably all walk in and be like, oh, this is new, right? I think it was probably like in the last quarter or maybe 6 months ago now, the very last press conference that Barack Obama did, President Barack Obama did, he only called on the women. And it was big news that he only called on the women. He called on the men all the time and no one said anything. But the one time he calls on all the women, it's like, oh, wow, how do we make it so that that's not a surprise? But again, it takes all of us, men and women, to be mindful of what those biases are, because I've heard other women talk about women who are quote unquote aggressive and call her the witch with a B, right? And so we do it to each other because we're not at all, biases, we receive them as well, right? And so how do we be mindful of being open and inclusionary, and also having our male counterparts do the same? Any other comments? Because this is really early.
I love it. I do have a comment.
Shoot, go ahead.
They actually started having some studies that you can take online that they will actually figure out what your unconscious biases are. They're along gender lines, they're along racial lines, they're along LGBT lines, and I don't have the link, but I can try and send it to you once I find it. And you can go out there and you can find out what your biases are, and once you become cognizant of them, then you can be able to work on them and really help everybody out. Because it's not just about women, it's about all the other lines that us as humans put amongst each other.
No, I think that's exactly right, and I think the goal is to try to uncover whatever those biases are. So it would be great if you wouldn't mind connecting that link to Michelle and Paris. It's one of those things that I think and having a forum like this is great for us to talk about it, because I think talking about things actually allows people to have a discovery and share information. It's one of those things that I think Howard Schultz tried to do when it came to race, and I think he got a lot of critique when it came to the execution of this idea of race together and people talking about race. I mean, the idea is that, you train baristas to know how to make a latte, but he was like, go to town when it comes talking about race, right? But I think that the under point, which was really critically important, is how do we have a conversation about things, right? And I think it's really important that we have a conversation about gender. And I think it's something that we are all now seeing with Caitlyn Jenner. There's more conversations we've ever had about transgender people because she told her story. Right? And so there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from that. And that's why these kinds of organizations are critically important. And it's important to have these conversations in your groups and in your families to ensure that we can expand that 14%. Right? Shoot. Jeanette, yep.
I think with regards to unconscious bias too, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that sometimes we have that within ourselves. And I think we've been talking about that as well. But for example, when you walk into an executive meeting, where do you sit? Do you feel like you can sit at the front of the room with the executive, or do you sit more in the back of the room? So I think a lot of the time when we think of unconscious bias, we attribute that to other people having unconscious biases, but that can be something that you have in yourself as well. So I really like what Allison said with regards to having an agent. How would your agent promote you, and you can utilize what that agent would say, and kind of promote yourself in the same way. Would your agent say to go sit in the back of the room, or would they say go sit next to the executive?
No, I think that's really important. It's one of those things. So the first big negotiation that I was part of, you think about the table, right? It's one big table, and we're on our side, and they're on their side. It feels like West Side Story, like everyone's going into their thing, right? And I, because I was the most junior person on the team, sat at the very end. And what ended up happening is that my colleagues sat right next to me, and all the other executives were on the other side of the table. And he did one simple thing. He positioned his chair in a way that was like this, and literally physically cut me out of the conversation. Not malicious at all. It was probably really comforting. But the entire time we're in a conference room for 3 hours, and I'm like trying to figure out how to get around to be like, I'm over here, I'm not just taking notes, and trying to be engaged. But literally, his body language cut me off from everybody else. And one of the things I learned from that was, if he was ever in a room and we were ever at the table, I would never sit at the end. And when he sits at the end, he does the same thing. But now he's not cutting anybody else off, right? It's like, and it's a matter of being mindful of those kinds of things. I took that on myself to say, I'm the most junior person, of course I should be at the end. And now being like, you know what, I'm gonna sit wherever I wanna sit, right? So I think that's critically important. Now, do I sit in the middle? If I'm leading the discussion, yeah, I sit in the middle, right? But if I'm not leading the discussion, I'm not gonna take the middle seat. And it's also, if you are an executive, be mindful of where you're sitting, right? Because you can probably set the stage in terms of where things are, or who, how you frame things up. We went to a negotiation once, and their team, they had a circle table, which I thought was awesome. And when I'm running that network, I will have circle tables in all my conference rooms because it says something about there is no hierarchy, right? Which I think is really, really important and kind of speaks to the idea of seats. But they also, there was one table that was rectangular and they sprawled around it, right? And they had some people that were sitting on our side, and everyone's now like, got cover our notes, what are you doing over here? But it did change the dynamic, I think, about who was leading the discussion and how they could vamp off of one another.
I want to touch bases on the dynamic of walking into a room and you have all the executives. You have all the executives sitting there. I work for a C-level executive. And what I like about when I walk into a room with all the C-level executives is that I'm coming in there to help them. So when I walk in, I have the answer of what they need. And I love to see the expressions on their face when I walk in because they're looking for something or they're needing something. And when I walk in, they're all like, oh, good, Andrew's here, And I'm there with the answers. I'm there with the deck. I'm there with the equipment. I'm there making everything better for them. And I feel the reception from them. I feel the welcome from them only because I'm there to help them and to support them. So I take that as, wow.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a part, but not really a part, but I can help. I can give the answers. I can make a difference. And they have what they need only because I walked into the room and the relief on their face. So
I think that's an important one. The idea is that sometimes you think you walk into the room and you apologize for walking into the room, right? As opposed to this idea of highlighting things, guys. No, we've been talking for a long time. Thank you guys for coming. I think it's a matter of how do you walk in? You walk in, listen, this is a company and we all get benefits and we all get salaries. Like no one is here doing volunteer work, right? And if you are in the room, it's because you have some value, right? So how do you walk into the room knowing that you are supposed to be there? And that energy, right? Again, we talked about the music folks who no one's even hearing the music and they can figure out who won. And the irony with that is that when you did actually turn the music on and the people who actually have an ear for this thing, like maybe Lydia, who knows a thing or two about music, it's the people who folks didn't even, without even hearing the music, were very much in line with who actually won the competition. So what your presence is and how you enter a room is critical in how people receive you, that you are primary, you are not secondary. You don't need to apologize for your presence because you were there for a reason. And we're all here for a reason. And we all know we're here for a reason because someone went to bat for you so that you could sit in these seats. Maybe everyone but Charlie Ergen back there. But for the rest of us, someone advocated for us to be at this company and to really, and really validate the fact that we need to be here, own that, live that. Shoot.
So we're talking about like tooting our own horns and self-promoting ourselves. So we want to be primary, not secondary. What do you do when you know you're the one that's accomplishing all of these things, but a teammate of yours is getting the reward for it? How do you come across as like, no, I had a lot to do with that, without coming across as being petty?
I think that's important. I think that is really important in a real challenge, right? I think there is an element of being a team member, and that's critically important. And I think it's important for everyone to know that you're doing it, which is nice, but who are the people who matter? Do they know, right? You say, nah, if you don't know they know, that's the conversation you need to have.
Right. And how do you do that?
I don't think it's a matter of being petty. I think it's a matter of establishing and saying, you know what, and this is how I would frame it. I'm going to give a random example, but I'd say, you know what, I look at this problem. I looked at this project that we did, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to sit and be part of this project. And I learned a lot of great things. So like when I led that one aspect of it that was critically important for what actually happened, and I took that on, there were a lot of great things that I learned from doing that. And I'd love to be able to have more opportunity to do those kinds of things. Or when I did that other thing, when I did that thing, it was really nice to be able to see how that actually added value to the entire team. So you don't have to say, such and such, Jane Doe is just getting all the credit. And actually, she didn't do anything. It's framing, right? It's how do you tell your story? How do you promote yourself in a way that is positive? Because you're right, no one wants to be deemed petty. That's not, you don't need to do that. But how can you frame it in a way that is honest about your contribution, but conveys the fact that you did it, right?
I can speak to that from the other side as a person that has done that to someone sitting right next to me. I have a habit of talking a lot and running over meetings at times, which I know I do. That's my bad. I understand that. And I've spoken on behalf of other people before, but since I had built a relationship with other people on the team, they were able to, this person in particular was able to come to me and tell me, like in a one-on-one, like, hey, let me speak for myself. And honestly, it was a great reminder that I'm in a new position. I am not the ringleader here. I don't need to be. And her coming to me really put things in perspective for me, and I actually really respected that she was able to do that. So don't be afraid of the conversation. That person might actually not understand what they're doing or might actually really respect what you think of them.
So I don't know if you all heard that point, so I just want to highlight the fact that this is a woman who highlighted the fact that she was doing this to another woman. So that I think there's an important point here to say that, again, this is not all malicious, and it's not like there's some gender divide. There are elements that affect us differently, but we all need to be mindful about what are the things that we do. And she basically highlighted the fact that a development of trust was critical in being able to have that very candid conversation. So when we go back to the friendship element, or we go back to the meetings that you're having and building up and establishing that trust, it can make those conversations that much easier. Even though they're hard, it can make them easier by being able to be honest about what those things are. Sorry, Allison, and so go ahead. You're next.
Every week on Friday, I send an email to my manager of everything I accomplished that week. And when I was an individual contributor, I did that. We've documented it, and somewhere the fact that it's documented your achievements, first of all, there's a ton of upside to that. One, it's a really great way to look back at your week and see where you could have gotten better. Two is, even if it's subconscious for that person, they somehow know that it's an email. So seeing it on paper just makes it a little bit more concrete. Plus, now I have, over the years around my team, I put all my team accomplishments and I send it before I leave every Friday. We review everything we got done and we send it in an email or some documented fashion, everything we accomplished. There's tons of upside of doing that. But one of them is who did what. And I also, now that I have a team, use it as a call out to people who really shine that week and accomplish big things. It's also really good for when you don't have a killer week. Look back and kind of acknowledge, like, what happened? Oh, this roadblock happened on that. But I had to recommend
God, apparently the world's coming to an end outside. So, so this is all for naught, apparently. Sorry, shoot.
Just, I agree with that, and it's like a skill of promoting yourself is like a skill. Getting used to doing that, and it becomes like second nature because you do it. And so it's like a skill, like you were able to highlight A, B, and C, D, and then getting used to doing that. It won't seem like you're petty at all. It'll just be like second nature. And what you mentioned in reference to every week doing that with your manager, I do that. And that was something our manager promoted doing.
Yeah.
Because we have a great manager, but so we do that as well every single week. But no matter what your current circumstances are, just definitely get used to and building the skill of promoting yourself.
Yeah. You, and then you. But I will say this, and I think that's critically important. Like, hiking and doing some other things, going to the gym is one of those things I'd like to do. And it's like no pain, no gain, right? That sometimes you have to get through, A, has to be repetitious, you have to do it all the time. And sometimes it may hurt or feel uncomfortable, but you're better for it. Right, so I think that's a critical thing of the repetition and being able to develop those skill sets.
Along the same lines, I would we're talking about promoting ourselves, but promoting others I think is so important as well. It's both for women and men, and I think in my career I've had both who have gone to bat for me, sometimes not knowing that they were even a sponsor for me. Like I had a manager who was a man who told me, after a meeting had happened, he was like, I am so sorry, so they were interrupting you, I talked to them, and after that I was like, oh, people are interrupting me, I'm going to look for that, and I will not be interrupted again. But it was them even just recognizing that was even happening and acknowledging it with me was like a huge eye-opener for me. And I think for, like, even for women who are in management positions, do that for other women or even male employees too, right? If they are getting looked over, make sure they're getting recognized. Allison's my manager, so she does it all the time. She's like, you did that great thing, like, Anna did that. She'll call it out in front of my director. She'll say, oh, you know, he'll say like, oh, that was a great thing that happened. She's like, Anna did that. That's great job. And that needs to happen, I think, more often, especially when it comes to women.
Yeah. Time, okay. Yeah, and we did just hear a tornado warning. So can we do 2 more comments, because I did call people out for comments. There was one back here. She's chit-chatting with Mike now. All right, you know what? I think we're going to wrap it up. Michelle, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.